Welcome into Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into a Thursday, January 12th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. We're streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, as well as, of course, dailyfaceoff.com. He's former NHL netminder, current Daily Faceoff analyst, Mike McKenna. I'm Frank Saravalli. Mike, what's going on?
Not a whole lot, man. Just getting excited to go up to the Wisconsin Dells this weekend for a youth hockey tournament and see the sights, man. Another part of the country I haven't been to. Looking forward to it. How about you?
Get some curds while you're there. Some
a lot of
famous
cheese.
Wisconsin cheese curds. I'm all over that. Mike, we made it. I don't know if you knew this or not, but the NHL hit the halfway point officially of the season with game number 657 being played last night. So let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock, and let's talk about our mid-season award picks. It's always fun to work through this. I think Connor McDavid, we all agree, is the runaway Hart Trophy winner. The only interesting part was who finishes second, and you can see those results from our staff of voters on dailyfaceoff.com later this afternoon. But what was way more interesting to me is the Norris Trophy vote from our group, and I find it really interesting, the fact that Cale Makar was not part of our top three. And you look at this season and how it's unfolded to this point. Well, maybe not a surprise that the guy that they've been calling Josh Morrissey has taken first place on our ballots. He's had an unbelievable season for the Winnipeg Jets. And here's the voting results. Cale Makar and Adam Fox did also receive votes, Erik Karlsson finishing third and Rasmus Dahlin second. I kind of feel like watching Cale Makar in the last few days, maybe he's not getting enough love, because earlier this week was the third consecutive game, Mike, that he's played north of 30 minutes. And we look at his point total, and I'm wondering, did we get this wrong?
I'm not sure right now, because I still think that Morrissey's had such a season so far that you just can't deny it. Like, he was a half a point a game player. And now he's turned into well over that under Rick Bowness. And, it all stemmed back to a conversation in the summer where Bowness more or less gave him the confidence to take the puck and do what he wants with it, be more judicious in his shots. He's not just throwing pucks from the point, carrying the puck more. So I still think we've got Morrissey in the driver's seat, but Makar, with the number of minutes he's playing, I think his defensive game's been a little bit south of the border this year in terms of how I've seen him carry it before, but like, who's he had to work with? So I think Makar probably belongs on our list. The only downfall I see to Morrissey is that he doesn't kill penalties. And that's the one thing that Makar does do. He's on the ice for everything. So I had Morrissey at the top. I also think we may be overlooking Dahlin, man. Like, he's played all situations, power play, 5-on-5, everything. And Dahlin's he's only 22 years old here. So I think it's a pretty tight race this year, Frank, and it's going to really take a while to play out. And I'm not sure if there even will be a favorite by the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, as much as it seems like I would like to flog myself for voting Josh Morrissey number one, I mean, he's on pace for 92 points, which is where Yossi was last year. I think he finished at 96, and he, of course, finished second to Cale Makar. But when you think back to not just the step forward that Morrissey's taken, but he's always been known as a shutdown guy, an elite defensive defenseman. Clearly that part of his game isn't lacking. So I don't know. He kind of seems like the ideal all-around candidate this year, but keep an eye on Makar. I just think it's the efficiency factor that he's had to play so much, has been asked to do so much this year with the injuries that they've had, that it's almost like he's had to tame down other parts of his game in order to just kind of get through the game from a pure efficiency standpoint. The other really interesting trophy race is the Calder, Mike, for Rookie of the Year. I'd be curious to see who you picked number one on your ballot. For me, it was Logan Thompson of the Vegas Golden Knights. It's kind of hard to think of him as a rookie, even though he's eligible because he did play last season and make an impact for the Golden Knights. But I just think back to the storylines going back to September and October. We were saying, man, it seems like I was saying, at least, I know you were confident in Thompson from the jump, but I was saying, man, it's a lot to hinge on a team that has significant Stanley Cup and playoff aspirations on a guy that just doesn't really have the track record. So for me, I went Thompson 1, Matty Beniers 2, and my third guy was actually Pyotr Kochetkov of the Carolina Hurricanes. All that guy has done is win since stepping in for their injured goalies. Where did you end up?
Well, first off, you're going to get a gift basket from the goalie union for having two of them on your list. And I was a little different. I had Matty Beniers first overall in mine, and I had Logan Thompson second. And, Thompson's season kind of reminds me of Steve Mason when he was with the Columbus Blue Jackets under Ken Hitchcock when he took home the Calder Trophy. And he had 33 wins that year, a .916 save percentage. He started off the year on fire and then really cooled off as the year went. And I kind of feel that's a little similar with Thompson, and just he hasn't been cold, but he hasn't been quite the same as he was at the start of the year. The advanced numbers have definitely started to slide for him. But for me, Matty Beniers is a first-line center. And for him to be a rookie playing that role and to be succeeding in all areas and to be responsible, if early in the season, I didn't think that Beniers was somebody that I really trusted defensively. I didn't think he'd learned the National Hockey League well enough to have that. And now you're looking at the guy, and I mean, look at his plus minus, plus 12. I still value that stat. But I think he scored some really big goals and big moments. He doesn't look overwhelmed by anything. And even at his young age, I think Beniers looks wise beyond what he's done. So I've got Beniers first. And then from there, I also wanted to give some love to Kalen Addison, the Minnesota Wild. He's leading the Wild D in scoring. He's been pivotal in the power play, but the defensive side isn't there yet. So that's my list.
Yeah, and I support you on Beniers, like in the sense that he's such a smart player that whatever offense he's achieving and point total is not certainly at the sake of what's going on in the defensive end. And some people, really compare him to being one of those cerebral, smart players that could have quite a long run in the NHL. And you're starting to see that now. On pace for approximately a 70-point season. Certainly really interesting. In case you were curious, the winner of our midseason Calder was Matty Beniers, Logan Thompson 2, and Kochetkov number 3. Mike, wanted to talk about the Western Conference standings because it seems like there's been a bit of a shift here in the last 10 days or so since the calendar flipped to 2023. And I'm wondering if we wrote off two teams in the St. Louis Blues and the Nashville Predators too soon. You look at their marks, both teams are 4-1 in January. The Blues beat the Calgary Flames on Tuesday night, coming back from a multi-goal deficit. When you look at the Preds, they lost their first loss of the calendar year 2023 to the Toronto Maple Leafs on Wednesday, but it was a solid game. And so we kind of viewed both teams through the prism of the seller standpoint when it comes to talking about the deadline, which is 51 days away. But if you had to pick one at this moment that's going to get themselves back in the race, which they're both squarely in on a points and points percentage basis, which team would you give the edge?
It's slight, but I go to St. Louis between the two zombie teams, I like to call them. They've been coming back from the dead here. And the reason being with Nashville, I think that UC Saros and Philip Forsberg really are the main reasons why that club survived basically the month of December to get to the point where now they're winning games. And like you said, they were good against the Leafs. They were good against the Caps a couple games ago. But against some of the better teams, they just aren't quite there. I think you're going to have to see more from Tanner Jeannot and Ryan Johansson from that lineup to really go. I'm not sure if there's as much room for growth with Nashville as there is with St. Louis. And one of the big areas with St. Louis that's grown is a power play. It's been killer, dude. Like in the last since the start of 2023, it's leading the NHL. That was a sore spot to start the year, missing David Perron, and it's being led by Thomas and Kyrou and Buchnevich. And that top six has looked really good with St. Louis, and the depth pieces have too. So if those young players start to go, and then you filter back in O'Reilly, Tarasenko, Krug, I think St. Louis has that chance, but they have to be better defensively, Frank. Both of these teams. I think St. Louis has more peak to them, but I think Nashville might be the more consistent of the two.
Speaking of peak, it's like peak NHL that O'Reilly and Tarasenko both go out of the lineup, two major pieces, and the team plays probably their best hockey of the year and on their best run of the year. I don't know. I have to give the edge in this case to Nashville. I just think with UC Saros in net, he's playing back at the level that he was last season. And when he's on, he can cover up so many of their mistakes. I don't have the same confidence when it comes to Jordan Binnington and their net. And that's kind of the perfect segue and transition to the New York Rangers, because you look at their deadline countdown series, and we posted the New York Rangers trade deadline playbook on dailyfaceoff.com this morning with 51 days to go. Well, Igor Shesterkin is still covering up so much of what is a mostly average Rangers team. I mean, look at a lot of these numbers. Goals for per game, 16th. Power play, 15th. Penalty kill, 12th. And their goals against is 8th because Shesterkin is back to doing Shesterkin-like things. And I think when you saw their swoon in the month of November, a lot of that was due to they weren't getting the saves. So now Shesterkin's back at the level that he was last year, I think. They're on a 12-2-2 run in New York. And when you look at their top deadline objectives, which I believe are a dynamic scoring winger to add to the mix, and potentially as a secondary objective would be something like trying to find a steady partner for Braden Schneider. Mike, they're in a really interesting spot because they're one of the few probably lock playoff teams when you look at where they've positioned themselves back in the race as having cap space, projected $7 million. They've got an extra first-round pick from the Nils Lundkvist trade from the Dallas Stars, and they've got a bevy of prospects from which to deal that don't include touching guys like Lafreniere and Kakko and some of these other guys that have been slower to mature this season. What do you make of the New York Rangers as they get close to the deadline?
I just look at that Lundqvist deal and think of how valuable it was to gain that extra first-round pick, Frank. That gives so much flexibility. The fact that Chris Drury, the GM of the Rangers, has some cap room to work with. I mean, you could, if you wanted to go out and pick up Patrick Kane, if that's the deal you want to make, you wouldn't even need a third-party broker, as you have in the article. Like, you could probably, if you're the Rangers, eat that contract if the Blackhawks are willing to take some of that. The Rangers are in an envious position, but I don't think they're going to be able to add nearly as much as they did last season in terms of just the quantity. I would really target a defenseman, though, Frank. Like Gavrikov, great. He's a good fit. Columbus is going to be looking probably for, I think, picks and maybe even a roster guy or somebody from down the road in the center. So they're not going to get a roster player from the Rangers. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I would really target defense. And I think that really some of the people you've got on your list would make a lot of sense. I really like James Van Riemsdyk there. I think he'd be a great fit for that club, especially at the net front. Boy, you'd have two weapons there. You'd have Kreider on your first unit, JVR on your second. So if there's any team out there that's positioned, man, you give me the Rangers. I think they're pretty good spot right now to spend.
Yeah, they're really in an enviable spot, certainly as it relates to a lot of other teams. I just wonder, to play devil's advocate with you, does Chris Drury play this deadline a little bit more conservatively? You think back to last year, a first, a second, a third, and 2/4, along with Morgan Barron, who's been a pretty decent contributor to the Winnipeg Jets this year, in exchange for Kopp, Tyler Mott, as well as Justin Braun on the back end. And one player whose name is escaping me, that it was like, wow, all four of those guys ended up.
Florida Panthers.
Yeah, Vetrano, that's it. They got him in a salary dump from Florida. That all four of those guys ended up walking at the end of the year. That was a ton of capital to give up for 4 rentals, a 10-week run of those guys. Maybe it paid off because they won a couple rounds, but still fell short of the ultimate prize. And I wonder if that maybe changes their thinking, if he thinks maybe the Rangers aren't ready to be in that conversation with the Hurricanes, even though they beat them last year, and maybe, some of the other teams in the East like Toronto and Boston and potentially the Tampa Bay Lightning. So going to be a fascinating deadline from a New York Rangers perspective. As mentioned, check out their deadline playbook on dailyfaceoff.com. Let's get to the number crunch with our guy, Cam Charron. That's right. It's time for our weekly visit with our guy, Cam Charron, for the number crunch, which is presented by Montana's. Cam, we hit the official midseason mark of the NHL schedule on Wednesday evening, which means it's time to admit that we were wrong about some things. It's always fun. I think the NHL is the craziest sport on the planet to predict. But when you look at some of the teams that were the biggest misses for you in terms of preseason predictions, which ones are playing so far below your expectations?
Well, there's 5 that immediately come to mind, and I think a big thing for it is that the teams in the Western Conference haven't been very good. So that's Calgary, Edmonton, Minnesota, St. Louis. You guys were talking a little bit about the Blues and how they've been a good team in the early part of 2023. I'm following that very closely because I'm a unofficial Blues fan here, and I want to see them do well. I find them very fun to watch. But the team in the East that, of course, I think everyone got wrong is the Florida Panthers. And this is I just want to point out how their depth has just been eroded over the past year. So last season, this chart is the number of players that they have at the top 144 and 5-on-5 points rate. I used 144 because that's 96 first liners, 32 teams, 3 per team, and then the top level of the second liners, so 32 plus 16 second liners. So the Panthers had 9 of those 144. That's among the best in the league, along with Colorado and Carolina. And so it wasn't just the strength of that top line. It was a very good top line last year, obviously, with Jonathan Huberdeau and Sasha Barkov. Those guys are still playing great this year. And I don't want to relitigate the Tkachuk-Huberdeau trade because Tkachuk's been playing great for Florida. He's really given them an element to the offense that they didn't have last year. Last year was a lot of stuff off the rush. It's the problem this year for them has been their depth. I was a big fan of that third line that they had of Anton Lundell and Sam Reinhart and Mason Marchment. They were able to impact the game in so many different ways, particularly off the rush. And losing Marchment to Dallas has really just destroyed the chemistry of that line. They haven't really found a combination that works for them on the third line. Lundell isn't having as good of an offensive year as he was last year. His points rate has fallen from among the best in the league to league average. And, Mason Marchment isn't having that great of a year in Dallas either, if you look at his 5-on-5 points rate. So that was just kind of, they caught lightning in a bottle. And the problem with the Panthers is, when they fall behind, as they often did last year, they haven't been able to outscore their problems. That was a big thing for them. When they lost or when they gave up the first goal, they still went 24-10-4. This year, when they've given up the first goal, they're only 4-10-1. So they won, they won over half their games, over 66% of their games when they gave up the first goal last year, and they've lost more than 66% of the games when they've given up the first goal this year. So that's a big difference. Not as dangerous as a team. I don't know if they can turn it around because I just don't see the horses like last year. They don't have all those elements clicking for them. We'll see what happens in the second half. I don't like their chances for the previous President's Trophy winners making the playoffs. You can see this year, they only have 5 players among the top 144. The other team I wanted to highlight too was Colorado. Everyone knows their injuries, and they went from having 9 players in the top 144 in points rate to just 2 so far this year. Among the regular forwards, they lost a lot of guys to both injury and free agency. So that's kind of funny to see. And it's amazing that the Avs have managed to hang around. They're lucky that they get to play in the West, to be honest.
Cam, I've had my eye on this really for the last week coming up because the Flames are in St. Louis against the Blues for 2 back-to-back. They played on Tuesday. They're playing again tonight. I'll be at the game. So you've noted here that the Flames have gone from 14th in 5-on-5 shooting percentage last season to now this year they've regressed. They're 24th in the league, and they're amongst the lowest teams in the NHL at 5-on-5. What have you noticed about the Flames?
So this is the benefit of watching the games, of watching Leafs and Canucks games as closely as I do, is I get some perspective on teams when they play the Leafs and Canucks. And I got to watch Calgary a little bit over December. Got to see 3 games of them. And the thing that I noticed about them is that they're pretty good off the rush and entering the zone and doing all those things. They have some decent team speed. The problem is that when the play kind of breaks down and they start to work off the cycle, then they really settle for a lot of low-quality perimeter shots. I think that this has been a big problem for them. So I've broken down all of the scoring chances and shots that teams and the Flames have had in the games I've tracked this year. So the cycle is it's within 6 seconds of a controlled zone entry, or after 6 seconds of a zone entry, after 4 seconds following a turnover, or after 10 seconds following a faceoff. So that actually makes up for about half of the shots that you'll see in an NHL game. And the Flames just haven't turned enough of those shots into scoring chances. You can see they're about half the league average there. About 15% of their cycle shots turn into scoring chances, where it's 30% for the rest of the league. And a lot of those are outside efforts. It's a lot of Nikita Zadorov from the point. Michael Stone is the one. He has a big shot. It's not a very effective shot. It finds shin pads in front, or finds the goalie's glove a lot of the time. It's not doing a lot to create enough space within the zone. And it's interesting for me that this is a team that has some pretty good prospects in the AHL with the Calgary Wranglers. They've called up Jacob Pelletier. They have Matthew Phillips, who's among the AHL league leaders. They haven't really given these guys a chance in the top six to try and create a little extra element, a little bit more speed, a little bit more space and deceptiveness within the offensive zone, something to kind of break down the play and create chaos. And I watch Toronto a lot, and that's an area where Toronto's really good, where they're able to just turn those long sequences into good scoring chances just by creating running little pick plays. They got the call on Game 7 because of it. I'm salty about, but they're able to find ways to create space in the offensive zone. That's just something the Flames haven't been able to do. In other situations, they've been fine. They've been fine off the rush. They've been fine forward checking. Their transition game's a little off. That's they're not really forcing turnovers in the neutral zone as much as they were last year, probably. I think the Flames are still hanging around. They still have these correctable problems. They're probably a team that should be in the playoff race. And I'll be watching that game against the Blues tonight. That's going to be a good watch.
Yeah, Cam, it's interesting to peel back a layer on the onion with the Flames, because while a lot of their game has been pretty good, as you mentioned, off the rush and on the forecheck, that's what I've seen with the eye test. I feel like the Flames season can kind of largely be explained by the goaltending. Jacob Markstrom going from .922 last year to .893 this year, that's going to have a significant impact. And so to mention the cycle as one area that they could really improve their game, not to mention the transition game, has really been helpful. So thank you for this week's edition of the Number Crunch, which is brought to you by our friends at Montana's. This season, Montana's is bringing back the viewing party with their new daily deals. Every night you can take advantage of their daily deals on both food and drink. Head on over to find out more details at montanas.ca. Thanks, Cam.
All right, talk to you guys next week.
All right, Mike, time for our Daily Faceoff inbox question of the day, hashtag AskDFO. We'd be happy to take your questions on Twitter. And this one comes from our guy, T Brown3434. He says, I love this question. It's so interesting, and it's made me think all morning. Who would you rather start your franchise with, Jason Robertson and Miro Heiskanen, or Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin? It feels like we got a little bit of Brady or Rogers here, but let's bring it on over to the hockey roll. What do you got?
This is a wicked question, man. Like, honestly, picking between the two would be really, really difficult. I think if you're just looking at like game-changing ability, I think Thompson gets the edge in that category, and I believe that Dahlin is going to be a little bit better defender than Heiskanen and probably top out higher on points throughout his career. So I'm going to go with the Buffalo duo, but you're right. Brady versus Rogers, this is a near impossible question. Any team would love to have both of them. What about you, Frank?
I'm going to go with the Sabres duo as well, but for different reasons. One, Tage Thompson is a center, and not to knock Jason Robertson, who's been a prolific scorer in his own right. I feel like it's a lot easier to find scoring wingers than it is to find centers that can do what Tage Thompson does. And oh, by the way, he's 6'6". And I agree. I think Heiskanen is actually the better defender, but I think Dahlin has the higher offensive upside, which you're already seeing already. Like where Dahlin is getting to on the point production level at the halfway mark of this season is kind of already at Heiskanen's basically his career high. I mean, you look at it where he's trending toward, it's going to be at a level way higher than Heiskanen has been in his career. So I'm going to go with the Sabres guys. Tage Thompson, the classic sort of late bloomer that's been, you can't take your eyes off of him in the NHL this season. So, Mike, fantastic question, and thanks to TB for that and for everyone that follows along wherever you watch the show. Tyler Remchuk, that brings us to our Daily Faceoff Pointsbet Daily Bet segment. And Tyler, oh my God, don't look now. You actually won a bet.
We won a bet, and we won a bet that was plus 140 with a shot prop parlay. So you know what? We're going to let that ride. So I'll have more on that pick in just a second. But first, there are a couple of straight bets I do like on tonight's slate, courtesy of our friends at PointsBet Canada. I bet on Connor Hellebuyck Tuesday night and the Winnipeg Jets against Detroit, and they lost in a high-scoring affair. Connor Hellebuck's save percentage was under 800. That was the first time this season that's happened. It's only happened 3 total times now in the last 2 seasons. So, of course, the one time I backed Connor Hellebuyck, he has a stinker. Well, you know what? I'm going to give him a chance to rebound tonight. I'm taking the Jets at minus 130. on the road against the Buffalo Sabres. I like the chances of them simply not losing back-to-back games and Connor Hellebuyck not having back-to-back poor starts and getting lit up again. -130 is a good price for one of the best teams in the Central Division. So I'm taking the Jets on the money line and also Colorado on the puck line. This one is moving towards Colorado. Earlier today, though, it was close to even money. Right now, you're still getting them on the puck line at -125. I don't think this is priced right. I think this should be one of those games where Colorado's like -180, -190 on the puck line. Chicago, yep, they've won 2 in a row. And I have a feeling that's why this line is set at where it is. But before that, they had lost 5 straight games by 2+ goals. I like Colorado to bounce back from their tough loss on Tuesday as well and win by 2 or more against the Hawks. And for my shot prop parlay tonight, we got one that's juiced up all the way to +167, and it's taking Quinn Hughes in Vancouver to go over 1.5 and Matty Beniers in Seattle to go over 1.5. Quinn Hughes has crushed this in 5 straight games, quite often throwing on 3 or 4 shots on goal. Matty Beniers, this dude has 11 shots in his last 3 games. He's scored a goal in 5 straight games. These lines being set at 1.5 is juicy for me. The payouts individually aren't great, but playing them together at +167, I like that spot a lot, Frank.
Love to hear it, and let's hope you get on a roll now. This is the step you needed to go on an absolute heater. Thanks to Tyler for our PointsBet Daily Bet segment. That brings us to garbage time with Mike McKenna, and you're watching the late game last night, and you're loving what you're seeing from an off-ice perspective between the native of North Pole, Alaska, and Buddy the Elf.
Yeah, I don't know who's higher up on the longitudinal lines. That's the ones that go sideways, right? I can't even remember. Anyway, there's a budding bromance out there between Phoenix Copley and Will Ferrell, and I'm absolutely here for it. I mean, imagine being a goaltender in the American League to start the year. You know, you're riding the buses around. Now, after every win, you're slapping fives with Ron Burgundy at the edge of the glass. Like, are you serious, man? And before the game, the Kings even had Will Ferrell up on the big screen, amping up the entire crowd. As you can see here, look at him go. Just chanting, "Go Kings, go." Well, turns out he's in the building. They flash it over to him, and he carries him to a 4-3 victory over the Sharks. And I gotta admit, I'm kind of jealous of Copley, because this is what can happen in LA, man. You never know who you're going to be able to meet and end up being friends with and slapping fives with after a game.
Yeah, this is what dreams are made of for Phoenix Copley, who you mentioned the victory. All he does is win. 12-2 on the season with a .904 save percentage for the LA Kings, has bailed them out in a season of brutal goaltending with both Jonathan Quick and Cal Peterson struggling big time. Thanks to Mike for garbage time in today's edition of Daily Faceoff Live. That's all we have for you. Thanks to Tyler Remchuk as well as Cam Charron and our head of production, Alex Allard. We'll be back with you on Friday, 12 noon Eastern. You know where to find us. Matt Larkin will be joining me for our last show of the week. So thanks to everyone, and enjoy the games tonight. We'll catch you on Friday.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to